Hey, it's Terry, your favorite no bullshit artist and business coach, and you're listening to Terry Talks, where we discuss all things taboo, uncovering art industry nonsense, grounding you in confidence and leadership to run an arts business with unwavering power and grit. And we are live. This is my third episode of Terry Talks. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching the replay, feel free to comment, to subscribe, to like, all that good stuff. And I can guarantee you that I will chat back. So, I have a list of podcast topics that I have been building for quite some time. Obviously, many of you know that I am new to the podcasting world and really just throwing ideas, sort of like a word vomit of ideas into this podcast just to get the creative juices flowing. So, a topic that I have been thinking about for quite some time is talking about the most harmless way to start a conversation with somebody. Maybe you see them out, maybe you have a very close relationship with them. The how are you? As innocent as that might seem, it is such a loaded question. And it's even more loaded for someone who has anxiety, for someone who overthinks, for someone who has a shit ton of things going on. This topic actually came, or this thought or opinion actually came about when I was hopping into a therapy session. This must have been years ago. And I said to my therapist, why the fuck are people asking me how I am? And what if I said, I'm not doing great? What if I turned around and said, you know what? I'm really feeling like shit these days. Things suck. My job sucks. I have no boyfriend. I am lonely as fuck. Like, imagine if you were someone who was just asking an innocent question, right? It is a cultural norm to ask people how they are. It's like a little, like, it's like a 1, 2, 3 sentence. Hey, how are you? Right? You go over to people, you give them a little smooch, you give them a hug, depending on how, your PTSD from the pandemic is, and you keep it moving. You never actually expect someone, especially someone you don't really have, maybe your acquaintances, and you don't really have like a deep relationship with them, to divulge how they really are. And so I'm having this conversation with my therapist, and I'm like, I think that people would be so shocked if I actually genuinely answered that question. Um, and we dove into why that question actually pissed me off so much, because the projection was real. The projection onto the question was even more real. And for a second, I was like, oh, fuck that person. Like, how could they ask me such a loaded question when in reality, like I said before, that's just a cultural norm, right? Um, it's how you greet people, it's a part of the script. And the thing about it was that I was in such a shitty place in my life that anyone asking me anything would have probably triggered me, right? Anyone asking me anything about my life, about my career, wanting to catch up, right? Depending on who they were, it was like me questioning my own, like I had been already asking myself, like, how am I? How am I actually feeling? And I couldn't find the answers to that except to be a negative Nancy. And no one expects you to answer that question, how are you? With like a 10-page story about how shitty your life is, right? They always kind of expect you to have another script, yeah, things are going well and family's good and, jobs, I'm working hard. And it's like that blanket that you put over things to kind of just keep the conversation moving. Well, then how genuine is the conversation if you're bypassing something that's like a really actually important thing? Now, of course, I'm an overthinker. I have big feelings. I definitely, analyze things. I also am really interested in psychology and in the way that people think. I And that comes from like me just being an educator for so long and really trying to tap in to my students needs and where they're coming from. So perspective and empathy are like a huge part of like my coaching career, and being able to also connect and vibe with my clients, right? I can literally get on a phone call and automatically read the room. And a part of that is a blessing, but also a part of that is really a part of that is, like soaking in. I'm a Pisces moon. So if you know anything about being a Pisces, like we're empaths, we can feel emotion. We can actually soak it up like a sponge. So if you are someone um who can like feel that pull, um it's different for someone else who might just be, innocently asking that question. So we go through this whole like narrative that I'm making in my head. I'm like, why the fuck did this person ask me this question? And what could they have asked me that maybe would not have triggered me in such a negative way? I was already feeling insecure about my life. I was already like, I could tell you all kinds of shit that's going on. I could tell you how I really am, right? Do you really want to know though? Do we have time? Because it's also about the setting, right? It's different if someone calls you to really genuinely catch up and you've got an hour and you're just kind of like schmoozing on the phone and you're really catching up with someone maybe you haven't spoken to, whether it's a couple weeks, a couple months, a year, whatever that might be. And so the conversation is clearly going to be more in depth. But if you're at at a bar, at an art gallery opening, or you're literally bypassing someone on the street, it's definitely something that I think people need to be a little more conscious about. Is like how you navigate conversations with people you don't necessarily know, regardless of what the cultural norms are. And I don't know in different cultures, right? Like I've traveled, in different places in the world, but I it's still very much a common thing that you would do anywhere in any country. And so one of the things that I learned as an educator was like to shy away from asking children how their day was. Because the most common answers that you're going to get while they are doing something else, right? They're going to walk in the door, they're going to drop their book bag off, and they're going to go and play with their toys, they're going to do their homework, and they're going to zone you out. Is to stay away from that question, right? Because they're just going to give you a fine and a good, and I had a great day, and peace out, mom, dad, like whoever. But if you ask them questions like, who'd you sit with at lunch today? What was your favorite class today? Did you make something in art? Are you working on this project still? Um, what are your highs and lows? And this little girl that I have been babysitting for the last 6 years, it's something that we do in the car. I'm like, rate your day from 1 to 5. Even that gives you a more comforting way of truly expressing how you really feel without getting into it. And of course, adults are going to navigate this differently. But here are some questions that you could potentially ask another adult. So, what was the most interesting thing that you did today? Right? I know you've been working on X, Y, and Z. How's that going? Do you have any shows coming up? Do you hey, like what are you drinking? I know that that's like a common question, but that is a great opener still. Might be annoying to many people, but it's a specific focused question on one thing that's not loaded, right? That doesn't induce a sense of like, oh, I have to have this like long-winded conversation with this person, because you can't possibly answer how are you in less than 5 minutes. No one can. No grown ass adult can do that. And if you can, please hit me up in the DMs and tell me how. um and you don't want to bring this negative energy to a brand new conversation. Like, that's not cute. That's not going to end well. You're going to end up maybe doting together, or you're going to end up, in the corner, talking about breakups together. And of course, that could be a bonding moment, but maybe a trauma bonding moment. So you want to, be careful of that. Um, are you having fun tonight? Did you do anything fun this summer? So you're bracketing it in a short span of time where you don't necessarily, you're not getting into too many pockets of someone's life. And for me, I have found that that's a really comforting way to look at it. Clearly, I don't um take this question to heart anymore the way that I did during that really rough patch in my life, but it's interesting how many things can like trigger the shit out of you. And like it could be anyone. It doesn't have to just be someone you're really close to, right? It could be a person on the street. It could be someone you're buying, you're at the grocery store and you're at the register and there's like, how are you? Like how's your day going? Even that's a shorter question. And I feel more comfortable with that short question. And of course, this is just me talking about this one instance in my life where this question had a huge impact. And not to project this sort of overanalyzation of this question, how are you? But I thought that it was an interesting topic that my therapist and I kind of dove into, and how personalized I made that moment. Since then, years have passed, and I've gained a skill to depersonalize so much through therapy, through working with clients, through just like my career and understanding different perspectives, being able to accept different perspectives. As anxious of a person as I am, I've developed skills, tools, been able to manage that anxiety and depersonalize the ways that I navigate conversations. Okay, how am I feeling? Can I check in really quickly? Can I do a 5-second scan? And for many people out there, they are living with anxiety in a constant state of fear. And I have those strong moments where I am living like that. I could wake up like that on any given day. But I also have moments where I check that and I go back into a safe space. It's not all the time that I am strong enough to do that, depending on the situation or how deep the trigger is. But it's really to say that, you know, I think people should really be mindful of how they are communicating with empathy, and if they are communicating with empathy. So anyway, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your questions. I'd love to hear how you navigate that conversation with people. If it's just like a natural habit, and then does that actual conversation go to? Is it shallow or is it deep? Of course, depending on the environment, all of that's going to change. But yeah, so thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.